prestige and visibility. But you should know where you want to punch, and in boxing you have weights. You can't just go to fight in any weight. You have to go, you are measured and you go to a particular weight, that's where you fight. Similarly in publishing, you have to know where you have the best chance of getting published. Most of us from our very beginning, we want to punch at the highest level, and then we get rejected several times, and we might even be demoralized. So think about where you want to pitch your publication, especially if you're an emerging scholar and you are going up, and who do you partner with in order to get published in some of these top-tier journals. But you could also consider publishing in second and third-tier journals. Those are still good journals. You are not competing with some of the leading professors who are publishing in those top-tier journals. But you could also be publishing in edited books, you contribute chapters. So an academic publication is not necessarily a journal only. You could also be publishing in books. In some universities, conference proceedings are also considered as part of publications. They even contribute towards subsidies for your universities. So this conference, if we were to write proceedings out of it, and let's say Jacob writes that and submits, that counts as part of publications. For his workload, or for those of you that work with workloads, that would also count as part of that. But where should you not publish? I'm sure you have heard about some of these predatory journals that are all over the place, offering you so much money to publish in them, but they mean nothing, basically. And most of us fall prey to some of these predatory journals. So avoid them. In most of your universities, there'll be a list of journals that are already classified as predatory, and you should know them. And in some countries, your ministries of higher education also publish a list of credible journals about where to publish. And so I would stop here for now because I wanted to give some of this background so that my colleagues can come in and talk to you about their own experiences, give you their tips, and then we'll come back later to talk about what not to do, especially after you have received comments from reviewers and from editors, as a mistake that most of us do once we are rejected. Okay, let me start by inviting Gerald to come and take a couple of minutes, and then after that, I'll invite Nene.
Ok, merci beaucoup, Becky. Quand je venais, je ne m'attendais pas à faire une présentation sur comment rédiger soit un article, soit présenter un mémoire, une thèse. Mais je vais rapidement vous dire mon expérience en termes de méthodologie de recherche, ce qu'on m'a enseigné. Et déjà, pour travailler un sujet, on m'avait aussi appris ce qu'on appelle aujourd'hui l'épistémologie. Chaque science a son épistémologie. C'est-à-dire, lorsque vous êtes, moi je suis en économie, on va me dire qu'en économie, il y a l'épistémologie comporte deux pratiques essentiellement. Soit vous faites de l'induction, soit vous faites la déduction. L'induction, c'est quoi? Lorsque vous prenez un sujet, vous allez définir votre posture. Est-ce que vous allez prendre un sujet sur la philanthropie à Dakar, vous commencez à vous embrouiller pour après trouver un résultat qui est une supposition. Donc vous avez pataugé, vous allez en sociologie, vous allez en anthropologie, en économie, dans toutes les sciences. Vous pataugez, vous rassemblez les idées, vous rassemblez la littérature sur ce que les gens ont dit, pour finir dire que la philanthropie existe à Dakar ou au Sénégal.
That is what you have found. So what you have done is induction. So which is part of the scientific method. Now, when you do this induction, the results that you come up with, it's an assumption. Now, to continue, you have to say that this result is just an assumption. And then later on, you will continue to do what we call deduction. You move from the principle that it is a form of philanthropy, for example, in Dakar, and then you will test this, you will experiment this, whether it's in lab, whether you are in pure sciences, or you are physicists, or but if you're in the social sciences, I am an economist, I will say, okay, I will have a questionnaire, I will go to the streets, I will interview individuals, so companies, institutions, all the components of the society, and they will confirm or they will say that it is not philanthropy. But in a quantitative manner now, I will have 1,000, 2,000 questions, depending on the size of the population that I will be surveying. And when I come back to process this, maybe out of these 1,000 that I surveyed, 1,000 will say, yes, we know of this form of philanthropy, like religious philanthropy. Another part of them will say we know about community philanthropy. Another will say, talk about diaspora philanthropy. And another might say the companies have activities to fill potholes. So these are all forms of philanthropy. For example, we can see Sonatel, which often goes to the neighborhoods in order to distribute water, rice, or a political person that distributes this or that. So these are all forms of philanthropy. So all of those who know some form of philanthropy will say, I know of this one. And when you go back to compile these results, what we say data analysis, you will see that each category of philanthropy is represented. And finally, you will then do what we call deduction. You will have come to a conclusion to say in Dakar, in Senegal, philanthropy exists because the high assumption would say that this is one of the risks. So go and you can ask that the results that you found in Senegal, is it applied in West Africa or in Southern Africa? So you will do the same work, administer questions to the other people in those countries, and based on the data that you will be collecting, you will store this data somewhere, and then afterwards, a student can come and had to do a literature review in all African countries, North Africa, West, Central, East, and Southern Africa. So there was a literature review that was done, and that is what we call the database. CAPSI has a database on philanthropy in sub-Saharan Africa. And I think that personally, Bikikia Silla has a database. He can even talk about philanthropy in on all African. This issue, we did this in 2011 terms, and once you do that, normally that the problem that you want to raise will surface. But when you do this literature review in a critical manner, the problem that you want to look at will appear, and that is what you will be calling the identified problem in the form of a question. And based on that question, you will define an objective. Now, if you want to conduct a qualitative study, because here we're now going into methodology, we've talked about methodology. It's if you want to do a qualitative study and you select the case of a country or of a philanthropic organization, you do a qualitative study by having to answer a few questions. It is not a 10, 20-page document, so you have to decide between the qualitative and the quantitative. Since this morning we've been talking about that. So the quantitative will look at when you have assumptions, then you will be doing a quantitative study. But when you want to do a mixed, also you can do quali or quantitative or a mixed study as well. Now, when you do that, you have to select the method, the methodology, this method that will lead you to a certain number of empirical results that you'll be presenting and discussing. But careful, the choice of the method is not by chance. The method that you select should be focused on the key words. For example, this morning I present a presentation on the perception of the contribution of the philanthropic sector on economic development. I looked at how will we measure this perception. So I said, let me have a small questionnaire. I used a mechanism that maybe people don't know, c'est-à-dire the Linker scale. If I administered the questionnaire to 400 people, a 90-page questionnaire, a qualitative study, but I mixed it with a quantitative study. So I took the Linker scale because I did not want yes or no responses. So I divided these yes, no into 6 items, which were variables and which were the substrate of my discussion. And this led me to do qualitative and quantitative. So I performed a rapid analysis and some of these results had recommendations. So in a nutshell, after the discussions on these results, you have to come up with recommendations and give identify new areas of research. So that is how a scientific article paper is structured from an economist's point of view or social science point of view. When we talk about economists, we think that method is all about calculations. No. I will end by coming back to a key issue. The theme we're talking about today is a theme that comes from economics. I will show this to you in 2 minutes. When we talk about African philanthropy, at an inflection point, the inflection point, I'm sure that all of you sitting here have not understood this very well, but we do this in mathematics, even in geomathematics. I will talk to you about inflection point. I will draw a curve here. Look at this. Have you seen this? It is like a logistic curve. The inflection point, where is the inflection point? It is here, right here, this part. You see in this part that is going up, philanthropy came from far and it's going up. It has even African philanthropy is somewhere here, around here, and very soon we will be there. You will see that this curve changes its convergence, and African philanthropy is at this level. So the pathway of philanthropy is what CAPSI and Trust Africa and other organizations have done in terms of research. What they have all done in order to influence academia and research is at this level. This is the inflection point. So very soon it's going to change. So we can analyze this. If I was asked to write a paper or a communication on African philanthropy at an inflection point, I would have first presented this curve and then explain that it is in the process of changing. You see the path, the change. What is the change here? We start the work, we call for contributions, work, symposium. We we create a African philanthropy chair in South Africa. We create a master's program, a research center, and today we're in Dakar with several organizations in the same room. You see, it has grown. So the path, maybe after this session, it's going to change, and we'll go to search for something else. So that is, in a nutshell, my contribution for this session. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you so much. We're not doing so well on time because we have to go for a reception at some point. But how many of you have heard, before I call on Nene, how many of you have heard of a fellow called Alan Sokel? So as Gerard was speaking here, I mean, we get so excited about some of these fancy terms. I mean, when we started studying philanthropy, some of us were not even thinking about, economics and behavioral sciences and all of that. But over time, so many disciplines are applicable, and we see the value of so many disciplines. And so some of us who might be sitting on the other end as journal editors, we can easily fall into the trap of the Alan Sokel. So Alan Sokel did this thing. He was a professor of physics in one of the universities, and he knew that there was a very interesting journal called the Social Text. And they liked a particular ideology, and he wanted to flatter with their ideological egos. And he wrote an article called Transgressing the Boundaries Towards a Transformative Hermeneutics of Quantum Gravity. And basically he was talking about falling from top buildings and not getting hurt and everything, but marinating it with some good ideological stuff that would make the editors just love it. And they loved it, and they published it. And on the day that they published it, he also did another publication writing now about how he had written nonsense, basically to test the editors. So I just wanted to lighten the mood because Gerald was making it very fascinating and technical. But the point is that when you think about writing, think about the journal that you are publishing on. What do they want? But in seeking what they want, don't do what Alan Sokel did, because if you do it, you are going to be caught up at some point. He did this because he wanted to demonstrate a point about maybe lack of rigor that the journal had gotten itself into, simply because they wanted to drive a particular ideological route. So let me invite Nene to come and spend a few minutes as well reflecting on this topic.
Thank you, Monsieur le Président. Alors, moi,
I am Nene Khan, lecturer at the University of Nouakchott, Mauritania, for those who do not know where Nouakchott is. I went in 2005. I have a very atypical path. I went to do a master's, and when I returned in 2000 in master's, I was part of a GIZ program to train university graduates on entrepreneurship. We realized that between 2001 and 2005, almost all the youth that we were training, more than 1,200, there were not many women among them. They were practically not represented. So that was my first question. Why were there no women in these training programs? So when they were here, and I asked them, why do you not attend this training? Of course, at the time, it was a High Commissioner fight against poverty with GIZ that worked together, and we were training them. They called us facilitators. But their response was that what they wanted to do was to work at a small scale. And it was very difficult to really identify their motivation. So in 2005, I drafted a draft thesis, which I sent it to my thesis director, and who said that it is interesting. So I submitted a request for scholarship at the French embassy, and I had this scholarship. So when I got to France, there were two issues. The first thing I had to do was read all the documents that were related to my theme. I was working on women entrepreneurship, so I read all documents that had a connection with women's entrepreneurship, especially in the African context. So for me, from that, I was like in Nouakchott, like in Dakar, we see mostly women who are walking in the streets, selling lettuce, sitting on the ground and selling lettuce. So I asked myself, why is that there are so many men in the big companies, and why should women always be selling lettuce and candles and vegetables? Why can't they do something else? So that was my starting point, saying that women entrepreneurship in Mauritania was a entrepreneurship of survival. So that was my assumption. Now, the academic approach, university approach, I had to have a very rigorous approach. So I had, you have to do, like my colleague just said here, we have to do literature review. So with my thesis director, who did not wanted Africans to come to France and stay there with that, he said, you have 4 years, and fifth year, you defend your thesis. If not, I will send you back to Mauritania. So, and I was happy with that. So what I did is I read the thesis that were on women's entrepreneurship. I did the literature review, and I did it with my thesis director. We drafted a plan, and for each chapter should not go beyond 50 pages, because previously people who were defending their thesis had maybe about 1,000 pages. And he said to me, I want 5 chapters. The first chapter talk about the problem, very important. You have to define your topic. The second chapter, you will talk about the literature review. You will talk a little bit about your topic, so literature review. The third point, which is quite interesting, you will talk about the reference framework. This reference framework was something. When I arrived in 2005 in France, I found their doctoral students, and they told me we have a big problem. We cannot progress because we do not have reference frameworks. I wondered what was a reference framework. I looked in the books and I went to find out what was a reference framework without really understanding what it meant. So a reference framework justified the choice of your model. Why are you using this model compared to another model? And we take a model, you have to make sure that you adopt this model in the investigation country. In my case, it was Mauritania, so I had an Anglo-Saxon model that I contextualized in the Mauritanian context. Then, of course, I had to go and investigate and look for information on the field, and that is where methodology plays an important role. Like he said rightly, there are different approaches, and methodology is dependent, of course, on the epistemological approach. So with your thesis director, agree on the approach you want to adopt. And if then you have to say that now I have the methodology. I will use a qualitative, quantitative approach, or you can say I'm going to use an epistemological methodology. So I am going to the positivism. I will draft my questionnaire and administer this questionnaire in order to collect information. When you are doing your thesis, they give you is do not be ashamed to ask questions. Do not be ashamed. Really do not be. When I was collecting data, I had issues with regard to statistics. And when that was a real problem for me, statistical data. So I recruited a statistical expert who was giving me data that I did not need. So it was difficult for me to explain to him what I wanted. And finally, I decided to do it myself. I bought books. I studied what was SPSS. I bought the software. I installed it on my computer at university, and the only woman in my faculty. Up till now, women were saying university studies, academia, it's reserved for women. And of course, with my help and others, we reversed the trend. 10 years after, when I went back, there are at least five women. There are at least 5 who recently defended their thesis, just to say that it's something that is very encouraging. Just a little story. The dean had called me once and told me, Nene, you know what? I called you because I was afraid earlier. There were 2 students. There were students who were there were a lot of students in the courtyard. And I asked them, why courtyard? And I asked them, why you asking? They said, no, we are not. And she asked me, profile, and your proposal is the best. I think, thank you very much. That brings me to my end.
So apologies, you could see there are 2 of them waiting here. They said at 7 o'clock we must stop, and they've been coming to indicate, but I couldn't stop us because I think this is an important topic. So what we're going to do is we will treat this as an advert for you to attend our annual PhD workshop, which is coming up in September, because I don't think we'll have time to discuss. I think this was really for them to share their experiences. I don't know if there are any logistical announcements from there, but what I know is that tomorrow morning we need to check out of the hotel before we come here, so that it makes it easier for those who are going to Sali. But let me leave it for the...
Actually, it's 2 announcements. One is about the DSA.
Okay.
And the other announcement is about to leave here the material of
interpreters. Okay. Okay, so the other, so I was saying that what I was told that tomorrow morning we check out. I think they will make arrangements for us to leave our bags secured there at the hotel, so that we don't really waste time after the sessions. We go back to the hotel and then off to Sali for those that are going to Sali. So if you have anything to clear with the hotel, rather clear it tonight, so that we don't have any challenges in the morning. And then there's a request that we leave the material for translation, the equipment here. We don't take it with us to the reception. And then there's, I think everyone who is sponsored to come here, there's a request that you see Trust Africa colleagues. I think there's a finance officer there who will sort you out with the daily subsistence, especially for last night and some of the meals that you might require. Where are they located for the DSA? Oh.
Yeah, but go ahead in English. I'll go ahead.
Okay. Oh, just here. So yeah, so those that might require the DSA, as you go out, you will find the colleagues there. Is there anyone who needs French translation? Because apparently the translators have already stopped at 7. Is there anyone who needs French translation so that she can come and translate? No? Okay. So I think from here we go upstairs, right? No. Is it upstairs?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, just a small logistics for tomorrow. Tomorrow the session starts at around 9, but we need to be here so that we distribute ourselves accordingly. So the bus driver has been instructed that he should be there exactly at 8:30, and 8:30 you are required to board the bus to come here. Otherwise, bon appetit. Oh yes, checkout, I think Prof has already alluded to. So you gotta check out this evening, I mean in the morning. In the morning, and then